we're talking right now because of modern technology. We are unfortunately sitting in both indoors, but we are nonetheless able to connect. So there are some really great things. There are some really great things about modern life, and we have to be careful about technology is sort of this. It can be really great insofar as like connecting with a colleague and a friend. It can also lead to doom scrolling and depression and isolation and all the other things. So let's talk a little bit about the current environment that we live in today and how that is affecting our mitochondrial health. I would love, and we don't have, enough time today to really go through all the parameters that you talk, because it's very, like, the book is very thorough. So you'll have to, this is required reading. This book is so well done, but I would love to maybe touch on chronic overnutrition, maybe thermoneutrality, and there's a bunch of others that I want to touch on, but I'd like to start with those if we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for the highest level for people, kind of what I go into in the book is food, movement, sleep, stress, toxins, light, and temperature. And I think food and chronic overnutrition is the perfect place to really dig into, because in many ways, food, it's just unavoidable. Like, we have to get it right, mainly because of the sheer magnitude of food that we eat in our lifetime. We eat 70 metric tons of food in our lifetime. And it is so astonishing. We forget this, but every single atom in our body is from food. Every single atom. We are 100% 3D printed constructed from food. Like, pregnancy is 3D printing a human from food. That's what it is. And so we have to get it right. And not only is it the building block, right, like the ink for this continual rebuilding of our bodies that's happening, but it's also the signaling molecule. It's the molecular information that signals to our genes and the cell receptors on the nutrient sensing cells of our gut and to our microbiome of how to function and what to do. So it's both the building block and it's the instructions. It is a language. Food is the language with which we communicate with our body about what to do. And right now, the food we're eating, 70% of it is ultra processed, made in a factory, just like chemical garbage. So the language, the words,
which is heavily subsidized, which also makes it a cheaper
Wild.
option than, let's say, buying fresh organic apples or whatever. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, people talk about processed food being cheaper. It's not cheaper in any way, shape, or form. Like, if you're buying ultra processed food because it's cheaper, I love what Mark Hyman says. I think it's brilliant. He says, if you're buying ultra processed food, you are paying for it 4 times over, not hypothetically, in real life, no matter who you are, at what income level. And the reason is because you're paying for the food itself, which is real dollars. You are paying taxpayer dollars to fund the farm bill subsidies that make that food cheaper. You are paying for your own healthcare costs for the diseases that will result from ultra-processed food, as well as for the healthcare costs of other people who are eating it. And you are paying with taxpayer dollars for the environmental damage that is resulting from growing food in a conventional way to make ultra-processed foods, which is decimating our soil, our water supply, and our air. So you actually are, no matter whether you like it or not, paying 4 times over for that food. So it's absurd. And the cheapest thing we could actually really do is to start buying real, organic, unprocessed food from the farmer's market. Marginally more expensive, maybe, and you're going to slash your healthcare costs. So the thing that's so interesting about our modern culture, and that we take sort of to be a given, is that we're insatiably hungry. We are chronically over-consuming food against our biologic drives. And this is very interesting. If you look at the world around us, there are thousands and thousands of species out there. And no other species in the world has a chronic disease and obesity epidemic except for humans. We are the only species in the world with PubMed and with experts, and we are the only species in the world with an obesity epidemic and a chronic disease epidemic. This is fascinating, right? Because it gets back to that point that it's actually not that complicated. If a giraffe can figure out how to not have a heart attack or be obese, we can figure that out too. But the key is the ultra processing of the food. Because we're choosing this packaged convenience food, what is happening is that language that we're speaking to our bodies is confused. It's like a foreign language that our body doesn't understand. We're giving it mixed messages. And I love to think of food as communication, because if we communicate clearly, then the body will respond clearly, and it will do things like become satiated, like it will produce the satiety hormones that will make you full. So we have to give it the inputs, and it will give us the outputs we want. And with ultra processed food, because it's nutrient depleted, with processing, it has depleted so many of the helpful nutrients and the language inside that food. And because it's grown in bad soil, so the food at a baseline has less nutrients, our bodies are basically sitting there still waiting for what they actually need, what they're actually expecting. And because they're not getting it from the garbage food, they will push you, your microbiome cells and your human cells, to continue seeking food until it gets its needs met. How do you get its needs met? You feed it real, unprocessed, organic food that came out of the soil recently and isn't nutrient depleted. So it's actually quite simple. No dietary dogma needed. No paleo, keto, carnivore, vegan. Real, unprocessed food filled with nutrients that your body's expecting. And one example of this that I think is fascinating, we're talking all about Ozempic and Wegovy and GLP-1 agonists. And fundamentally, if you step back, these drugs, people are calling them miraculous because they are getting us to not want as much food. We have given the body a signal that's making us insatiable, which is ultra-processed foods, engineered to make us hungry and just drive us to eat more. So we see this drug as a miracle in some way because it's somehow helping us get over these cravings that are causing so much pain and suffering in our lives. That's why these are on track to be the highest grossing drug in world history, because we are so suffering from our craving that's driven by ultra-processed food. And what has not made it into the conversation even remotely is the fact that the body makes its own GLP-1. It makes the peptide that is in this injectable material. Yeah. And the way your body makes GLP-1 is that it's simple biochemistry. You have L cells in the gut. Those L cells in the gut have nutrient sensors. They're constantly scanning for nutrients. The nutrients they're looking for: polyphenols, antioxidants, fiber, protein. When they get those things and bind onto them, it's a signal, it's communication with the cell that it has what it needs, and it pumps out GLP-1. And GLP-1 is broken down by an enzyme called DPP-4. And DPP-4, if it's inactivated, will cause GLP levels to rise even further. And of course, the things that inactivate DPP-4 are the things you'd expect: whole antioxidant-rich foods, protein, lots of different herbs and spices. So all that is to say, our insatiable drive to eat is by design. It's to get us to be bigger consumers of ultra-processed food. And it is fundamentally, our insatiable cravings are because we are sending mixed messages to our body with the food that we're putting in. And if we put real unprocessed food in, our body will respond beautifully and stop us from being hungry. And so I think it's a lot simpler than we really think.
I really love what you're saying. If I can reframe it in a way, and feel free to
Please
correct me or redirect me here if I've misspoken. But when I hear you talking about the diet, it's not about adhering to, as you said, like whatever name, the paleo 30, the whatever it is, keto, vegan, whatever. It's about thinking about, what does my body need? What do I need to get from my diet in order to be healthy? Versus trying to keep away, with carnivore, it's like no carbohydrates. With vegan, it's like no meat. With keto, it's like no carbohydrates. Instead of looking at it as, what do I need to eliminate from my diet to be healthy? It's like, what do I need first? And in the book, you talk about a couple of different compounds, substrates that signal to the body with this idea of food is communication. It's the Duolingo for your body, right? It's like the omega-3 fatty acids, tell our bodies, put down your defenses. Things are safe now. The cruciferous vegetables, and this is from your book, talk to the DNA and say, it's a tough time. We must produce more defenses. Leucine tells to the muscles, it's time to build, let's go. Magnesium tells to our neurons to relax. Fiber tells our microbiome, I love you. Intermittent fasting says we need to clean things up a little bit here.
Yeah.
So this idea of what can I get? How am I going to get omega-3 fat? How can I tell my body that we don't need to be in defense right now?
Yeah.
We can so maybe that's salmon, maybe that's some nuts and seeds, maybe that, thinking about just high level, what do I need to get from my diet? And then, and only then, you can have the Cheetos if you want afterward. Now, I'm not saying that you should all the time, but I'm like, if you really want to, if it's like, listen, Cheetos are like a make or break for me, fine. But have it after your salmon, have it after your cruciferous vegetables. And if you're still hungry, which is unlikely that you will be because of the volume of food that you've taken in and all of the signals and all the chemical messaging that you've just talked about, then and only then you can move to the ultra processed foods if that's still like like that's the thing that you need, right? How do you think about that as a framework for eating?
Yeah, I mean, basically the way I have boiled it down in the book, after giving people really this more like first principles philosophy about the communication, the language, and what is a craving really, is to just boil it down into 5 things, chemical piece of information you want to put in your body, and 3 you want to take out, ideally with every meal. And this is based on, of course, like really breaking down the literature to what does a cell need, or what will it benefit from to do its best work and to have all the resources it needs to function properly and not be overburdened with things that are going to hurt its functioning. Because fundamentally, what we're trying to do with our health journey is support our cells and having what they need to work properly. Because again, we're like 40 trillion cells, and the well-functioning work of all those cells bubbles up into a healthy, happy, joyful, limitless life. And so we want to do what we can to support those machines. When I did look at that and boil it down, the 5 things that I think really everyone can benefit from in putting in all their meals is an antioxidant source, a probiotic source, a healthy protein source, an omega-3 source, and a fiber source. And so those are the 5 components to kind of try and build every meal from. And then the 3 things to take out are ultra-processed grains, ultra-processed sugars, and ultra-processed industrial seed oils. Basically things that didn't really exist about 100 years ago. Of course, we had grains, but a smushed grain, a whole grain, is very different from an ultra-processed refined grain, which is like the true white flour that's been chemically separated. So 5 in, 3 out. And then, like you said, it's about understanding what are your favorite sources of each of those components. So fiber, I always keep chia seeds, basil seeds, flax seeds, beans, legumes at my house. They're always there. So I've got great fiber sources. Avocado, raspberries, also great fiber sources. For antioxidant sources, some of the highest antioxidant sources are nuts, especially pecans, seeds, allspices, teas, cocoa, and then, of course, colorful fruits and vegetables. The most colorful, the better. For omega-3s, I've got my cans of wild-caught sardines, salmon, mackerel. I've got chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. For my protein, I've always got a freezer full of wild game meat, elk, bison, ground chicken, heritage pork, got fish, beans, legumes. Those are my protein sources. And then for my probiotic sources in the fridge, I've got my sauerkraut, my kimchi, my whole milk pasture-raised yogurt, my beet kvass, my low sugar probiotic sources. So miso. So once you have your mental checklist, and of course the book shares the full list of all of these things, and stock your kitchen to have all these things, a lot of meal making just becomes a mix and match of like, how do I pull from each of these things? And I really do believe that if you can essentially create meals that have these different components that our cells expect and need, so much of health just gets so much better. And the beauty is that if you're thinking in this component-based way of eating, that's really about just like meeting your cell's needs with compassion and love, it totally transcends dietary dogma, because a vegan could do that, what I just said, and a person on a keto diet could also do that. And so and of course, paleo, Mediterranean, it works for any of it. The only one that it doesn't quite work for is carnivore, which I talk about in the book because there's some really interesting redundant pathways that actually get you some of the same needs met through a carnivore diet. But it does transcend a lot of the dogma and gets us just really focused on true cellular biology, but in a really simple way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I love that idea of just mixing and matching. So you just think about your fridge as like the top shelf is like your omegas, your middle shelf is your probiotics, then the third shelf is the protein, and then we got the probiotics and the fiber. And then you just kind of like take one from each shelf and there you go, you have lunch, there you go, you have breakfast, there you go, you have, dinner. Let's talk about some of the other, I mean, that's so beautiful and so simple and elegant. And yet, I was having this conversation with a cancer biologist recently, and we were talking about how colorectal cancer is the number 3 cancer, and not all it would require, this is not the only thing, but like if we just had more fiber, that number 3 spot, it would be knocked off that number 3 position so fast, because that's one of the reasons is Americans, Westerners, we eat a very fiber deficient diet and we're not feeding the colonocytes, etc. So I just love how simple and elegant. I would say this is like far side simplicity insofar as you've thought a lot about it to make it simple. There's been a lot of thinking it's not just like a 1 + 1 = 2 kind of simplicity. It's like a E = MC² kind of simplicity. It's like it's a simple equation, but there's been a lot of thinking that's gone into it.